5 minutes ago, in a move no one saw coming, Prince William made a decision that sent shockwaves through the palace corridors. A portrait personally demanded by Camilla, positioned in a historic gallery meant for monarchs and legacy-defining figures, was quietly but decisively removed. No announcement, no ceremony, just silence, and a message so loud it could not be ignored. That gallery has never been just a hallway lined with framed faces. It is a sacred timeline. A silent declaration of who mattered, who shaped the crown, who endured long enough to become part of its permanent story. Kings who carried empires, queens who steadied storms, heirs who waited a lifetime for destiny. Every portrait hanging there represents not simply status, but sacrifice. Legacy is not requested in that room. It is earned. And that is precisely why Camilla's presence there was never going to be a simple addition. Whispers had circled for weeks before the portrait was unveiled. Insiders spoke of a quiet insistence, a firm belief that her place beside history was not optional, but overdue. Placement mattered, position mattered, height, lighting, proximity to certain revered figures, every detail reportedly negotiated with an intensity that unsettled traditionalists. Some called it confidence, others called it ambition. A few, in hushed tones, called it something far more dangerous. Behind closed doors, tension simmered. Advisors debated protocol. Courtiers exchanged uneasy glances. The question no one dared say aloud lingered like a shadow. Was this about recognition or about rewriting perception? The monarchy survives on symbolism, and symbolism once altered can shift power without a single speech being made. For Prince William, the situation cut deeper than procedure. Those close to him describe a growing discomfort, a tightening silence whenever the gallery was mentioned. He understood optics. He understood the fragile balance between honoring the present and preserving the past. But what troubled him most was what some insiders allegedly referred to as legacy overreach, a push that felt less like inclusion and more like occupation. He did not argue publicly. He did not protest when the portrait first appeared. He watched. He listened. And he waited. Then, without warning, the decision came. The removal was executed with startling precision. A small, trusted circle was informed. No broad staff briefing. No drawn-out deliberation. Within minutes, the portrait that had sparked weeks of quiet debate was lifted from its place among history's giants. By the time most aides realized what had happened, the wall had already been restored to its previous order, as if the interruption had never existed. But it had existed. And everyone knew it. Shock rippled through senior royal offices. Phones buzzed. Meetings were abruptly rearranged. Some aides were said to be stunned by the boldness of the move. Others, quietly relieved. The act itself was silent, but its meaning thundered across the institution. Because this was not impulsive, it was deliberate, it was measured, and it was unmistakably personal. In that single act, Prince William did more than adjust a wall. He signaled a boundary. He asserted that legacy cannot be forced into place simply by proximity to the crown. And as murmurs began to spread beyond palace walls, one truth became impossible to ignore. Something deeper was unfolding beneath the surface of royal unity. But what most people don't know is that this wasn't just about a portrait. It was about power, control, and a line William had finally decided would not be crossed. Long before the portrait ever touched the gallery wall, Camilla had reportedly made it clear her image belonged among Britain's most powerful royal figures. What seemed like a simple artistic addition was, insiders suggest, a calculated move to cement her presence in a space traditionally reserved for uncontested legacy. And not everyone agreed she had earned that place. The gallery itself is not an ordinary corridor of royal decoration. It is an unspoken hierarchy carved into canvas and gilt frames. A curated lineage that stretches back through triumph, scandal, endurance, and sacrifice. Entry into that room has never been casual. It has never been rushed. The figures honored there did not simply marry into the institution. They carried it through crisis, steadied it during revolt, or embodied it so completely that history had no choice but to remember them. To hang there is to be sealed into permanence. That is why the alleged conversations surrounding Camilla's portrait unsettled so many within palace walls. Sources suggest her request was not tentative, It was firm, direct, framed as a natural progression of her role. After all, she had stood beside the king. She had weathered years of scrutiny. She had, in her view, earned recognition. But recognition in the monarchy is rarely self-proclaimed. It is granted slowly, often grudgingly, by time and public sentiment. And here, time felt compressed. Behind closed doors, discussions reportedly grew tense. Senior aides debated precedent. Some argued that modernization required broader acknowledgement of contemporary royal figures. Others warned that forcing symbolism too quickly could fracture fragile loyalties. The gallery was not just symbolic, it was sacred territory in the quiet politics of legacy. Alter it carelessly, and the ripple could outlast a generation. The timing of Camilla's push raised even more eyebrows. The monarchy was already navigating delicate transitions. Public trust was fragile. Conversations about the future were intensifying. To insert her image into that historic space at such a moment felt, to critics inside the institution, like staking a claim before consensus had formed. It wasn't merely about art placement, it was about narrative control. And beneath the formal discussions lay something far more personal. A subtle tension had long existed between generations of royals. The older guard, shaped by tradition and survival, believed in gradual consolidation of status. The younger generation, particularly William, carried scars from a very different chapter of royal history. Their understanding of loyalty, of sacrifice, of what the public remembers and what it refuses to forgive, was forged in emotional fire rather than ceremonial privilege. For William, diplomacy is instinctive. He understands restraint. He knows when silence preserves unity. But insiders suggest that this moment forced him into an internal reckoning. Was honoring protocol more important than honoring memory? Was accommodating present authority worth unsettling unresolved history? Every decision he makes carries not just political weight, but emotional consequence. Because woven into this debate was the quiet, persistent presence of his mother's legacy. Diana's memory is not an artifact of the past. It is a living force within public consciousness, and within William himself. The idea of reordering symbolic spaces without considering that emotional inheritance was never going to be simple. It was never going to be neutral. So while outwardly the palace maintained composure, beneath the surface lines were being drawn carefully, quietly, but unmistakably. Camilla may have believed her position in that gallery was a natural evolution of her standing. She may have assumed that time had softened resistance. Yet in pushing forward, she stirred emotions that had never fully settled. And while Camilla believed her position was secure, she underestimated one critical factor: William's unwavering memory of the past. For Prince William, the gallery was never just about portraits. It was about history, loyalty, and the silent presence of a mother whose shadow still stretches across every royal corridor. When Camilla's image was placed on that wall, some say it wasn't just paint on canvas, it was a reopening of wounds that never fully healed. Diana's legacy is not confined to memory. It pulses through public affection, through unresolved emotion, through a generation that never stopped seeing her as the heart of the monarchy. She was more than a princess. She became a symbol of vulnerability inside an institution built on composure. And for William, that symbol is deeply personal. It is childhood. It is loss. It is the price of living beneath a crown that often demanded silence over truth. Those who understand him say his loyalty to his mother's memory is not loud or theatrical. It is quiet, steady, protective. He rarely speaks of it directly, yet it shapes him. It shapes how he sees tradition, how he measures fairness, how he responds to perceived injustice. And when Camilla's portrait entered a space saturated with historic significance, it stirred something deeper than disagreement. It touched legacy. Public perception has always drawn comparisons between Diana and Camilla. Fair or unfair, those parallels never disappeared. For some, Camilla represents endurance and eventual acceptance. For others, she symbolizes a chapter of pain that cannot simply be reframed by time. The gallery, meant to embody uncontested reverence, suddenly became a battlefield of interpretation. Was this inclusion a natural evolution of the monarchy? Or was it an attempt to equalize histories that were never emotionally equal? Within the palace, the tension was less visible but no less intense. Symbolic spaces carry territorial meaning. The placement of a portrait is not random, it communicates hierarchy, honor, narrative. By occupying that wall, Camilla's image entered a conversation about permanence. And permanence, in royal tradition, must withstand more than position. It must withstand memory. For William, the stakes were not procedural. They were personal. Protocol can be debated. Titles can be negotiated. But emotional inheritance cannot be rewritten. Insiders suggest that private conversations in the weeks following the portrait's placement were heavy with restraint. William listened more than he spoke. He asked measured questions. He weighed consequence against conviction. But beneath that calm surface, resolve was forming. He was not seeking confrontation. He was calculating impact. Because to challenge a symbolic decision is to challenge authority itself. And yet, allowing it to stand untouched risked signaling acceptance of something he may not have fully reconciled. The monarchy survives on continuity, but it also survives on clarity. And clarity sometimes demands uncomfortable decisions. Those closest to him say this was the moment where past and future collided. A son protecting memory, an heir protecting vision. The gallery had become more than a room, it was a line in the sand between what had been endured and what would be allowed moving forward. And though no public argument erupted, an inevitable confrontation began taking shape in silence. A quiet test of boundaries. A question of who defines legacy. But emotion alone does not move palace walls, strategy does. This was not a spontaneous act of rebellion. Sources suggest Prince William waited watching, listening, calculating. The removal of Camilla's portrait was precise, intentional, executed without spectacle. And perhaps most telling of all, it was done without seeking approval from those who once would have demanded it. By this point, William was no longer simply the dutiful heir learning the mechanics of monarchy. He had stepped into a new phase of influence. Decisions that once required layers of endorsement were increasingly passing through his quiet authority. Not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. His voice carried weight in strategic discussions, in matters of image, in long-term planning. And with that growing influence came a realization. If he did not define the future now, someone else would define it for him. Insiders claim he did not move alone. A small circle of trusted advisors, individuals who understood both tradition and public mood, were allegedly consulted in confidence. No official meetings, no broad memos, just discreet conversations layered with caution. The question was never framed as personal resentment. It was framed as institutional direction. What message does this send? What precedent does this create? What does it imply about the hierarchy of memory? Timing was everything. The removal did not occur during a public controversy. It did not coincide with media scrutiny. It happened in a moment of relative calm. That, perhaps, was the most strategic choice of all. No distraction. No competing headlines. Just a quiet correction made before the symbolism could root itself deeper. The act itself was swift, handled by a minimal number of staff, executed with efficiency that suggested rehearsal rather than impulse. When word began to circulate internally, the reaction was described by some as stunned silence. Not outrage. Not chaos. Silence. The kind of silence that signals recognition. Recognition that a boundary had been drawn. Recognition that a shift, subtle but undeniable, was underway. There was no public statement. No explanation offered to press or public. And that absence of commentary was powerful. In the monarchy, silence can speak louder than decree. By refusing to justify the decision, William avoided framing it as confrontation. Instead, he allowed it to stand as fact. The portrait was gone, the wall restored. The message implied rather than declared. For many inside the palace, this was more than an isolated adjustment. It felt like a generational pivot. Charles had navigated decades by absorbing tension, by balancing relationships carefully, by allowing compromise to soften conflict. William, shaped by a different era and different wounds, appeared willing to define limits more clearly, not recklessly, but decisively. And perhaps most striking of all was how Camilla reportedly learned of it. Sources suggest she was not forewarned. There was no private call, no courtesy briefing before the action was taken. The discovery came after the fact, after the decision was irreversible. For someone who had reportedly fought to secure that place in the gallery, the realization that it had been undone without consultation carried its own weight. Not just a removal of canvas, but a removal of assumed influence. What William demonstrated in that moment was not defiance. It was control. A controlled recalibration of symbolism. A controlled assertion of authority. A controlled signal that the future king would not be passive in shaping the monarchy's narrative. But strategy has consequences. And even the most carefully measured move can ignite emotions that strategy alone cannot contain. And when Camilla discovered what had happened, the silence inside the palace became deafening. Those closest to the palace described the moment Camilla learned of the removal as cold and explosive. The portrait she fought to secure gone. No warning. No discussion. Just absence. For a woman who fought decades to secure her standing, this wasn't merely disrespect. It was a statement. For years, Camilla's journey within the monarchy had been defined by endurance. Public skepticism. Relentless scrutiny. A slow, calculated climb toward acceptance. Every appearance, every speech, every carefully managed gesture had contributed to rebuilding an image once overshadowed by controversy. The gallery placement was not simply decorative, it was symbolic validation. A quiet acknowledgement that she had moved from outsider to fixture. And when that symbol vanished without consultation, it cut deeper than protocol. Insiders suggest that what followed was not theatrical outrage but controlled fury. Questions were asked sharp, deliberate, demanding clarity. Senior aides found themselves caught between loyalty and shock. Who authorized this? When was it decided? Why was there no discussion? The answers reportedly were brief and unwavering. The decision had been made. The action completed. There would be no reversal. Humiliation in royal circles is rarely public. It unfolds behind sealed doors, beneath polished composure. But humiliation nonetheless carries weight. To secure a place in history only to have it removed suggests more than disagreement, it implies rejection. And for Camilla, whose path to the throne had already been fraught with comparison and doubt, this moment threatened to unravel carefully constructed legitimacy. Within the palace, subtle divisions began to surface. Some believed William's move signaled necessary modernization of future-focused monarchy, unwilling to blur symbolic lines. Others viewed it as unnecessarily provocative, a gesture that risked destabilizing internal unity. Conversations grew hushed, but intense. Alliances, once assumed stable, were quietly reassessed. And then there was Charles. Sources described his position as restrained, measured, perhaps deliberately distant. Publicly, there was no acknowledgement. Privately, speculation suggests he found himself balancing two forces: loyalty to his wife and recognition of his son's emerging authority. Intervening could undermine William's growing leadership. Remaining silent could be perceived as tacit approval. Either path carried consequence. So silence once again became the chosen language of the crown. But silence does not contain tension. It amplifies it. Before long, whispers began slipping beyond palace walls. Journalists sensed a shift. Royal correspondents hinted at internal recalibration. Anonymous sources fed fragments of the story into the media bloodstream. What began as a private correction threatened to become a public confrontation. The narrative was no longer confined to tradition or symbolism, it was evolving into a generational clash. For Camilla, the removal was personal. For William, it was principled. For Charles, it was precarious. And for the monarchy as a whole, it was destabilizing. Because once a symbolic decision becomes a power struggle, it no longer lives quietly within a gallery. It stretches outward, touching perception, loyalty, and authority. The fracture, once limited to a single wall, was widening, subtle but undeniable. And as tensions simmered behind guarded expressions and controlled statements, it became clear that this conflict would not remain sealed within palace corridors. Yet this battle was never confined to private corridors, it was destined to spill into the public eye. When whispers of the removal reached the public, the reaction was instant and divided. To some, William's decision was long overdue. To others, it was an unprecedented insult. Social circles, commentators, and royal watchers ignited with debate. And suddenly, the portrait was no longer just art, it was a referendum on the monarchy's future. The first headlines were cautious: palace adjustment, internal repositioning. But within hours, speculation sharpened. Commentators dissected symbolism with surgical intensity. Was this a quiet rebellion? A calculated humiliation? A preview of a future reign unwilling to compromise? Every outlet seemed to frame it differently, yet all agreed on one thing: something significant had shifted. Television panels filled with experts speaking in careful tones, but beneath their restraint was clear fascination. Royal historians weighed tradition against modern perception. Political analysts framed it as a generational recalibration. Some praised William's decisiveness, arguing that the monarchy survives by knowing when to draw firm lines. Others warned that such moves risk appearing personal rather than principled. The narrative was spiraling beyond palace control. Then came social media, raw, unfiltered, relentless. Within minutes, hashtags began trending. Clips of past interviews resurfaced. Old comparisons between Diana and Camilla were revived and reinterpreted. Younger voices online framed William's action as protective, even heroic, a son safeguarding memory. Older generations expressed discomfort, questioning whether public symbolism should be unsettled so abruptly. The divide was not just about loyalty. It was about identity, about what the monarchy represents in a rapidly changing world. For William's supporters, this was strength, a future king demonstrating backbone, a leader unwilling to blur legacy for convenience. They saw conviction where others saw conflict. They argued that respect for history sometimes requires bold correction, and in their eyes, William's silence spoke louder than any speech could have. But Camilla's defenders were equally vocal. They pointed to her years of service, her gradual acceptance by the public, her visible dedication beside the king. They questioned whether removing her portrait dismissed that journey entirely. To them, the act felt dismissive, an erasure of hard-earned legitimacy. What some viewed as clarity, others perceived as cruelty. As debate intensified, deeper questions resurfaced. Who truly defines royal legacy, the institution, the public, or the individual poised to inherit the crown? Is symbolism a reflection of consensus, or an assertion of power? The removal reopened conversations about legitimacy that many believed had finally settled, and once reopened, they proved impossible to contain. Meanwhile, the monarchy itself remained publicly composed. No statements, no clarifications. That silence again became fuel. In an age where transparency is demanded instantly, withholding explanation can appear strategic or suspicious. Every hour without comment amplified speculation. Was this coordinated? Was Charles informed? Was this the beginning of a broader restructuring? The fragile balance between tradition and transition now stood under intense scrutiny. The institution that thrives on stability suddenly appeared caught in internal recalibration. And while the debate raged across headlines and timelines, one truth emerged clearly: this was no longer about a single portrait. It was about direction, about authority, about the shape of the crown in the decades to come. But beneath public opinion lies a deeper question: what does this mean for the future king? In one decisive gesture, Prince William may have revealed more about his future reign than any speech ever could. Removing that portrait was not just about Camilla, it was about boundaries, about vision, about the kind of monarchy he intends to lead when the crown finally rests on his head. For years, observers have speculated about what kind of king William will become. Will he preserve tradition at all costs, or will he reshape it quietly from within? The portrait's removal offered a glimpse of the answer. This was not recklessness. It was restraint paired with resolve. A signal that modernization, in his view, does not mean diluting symbolism, it means refining it. William has long spoken about streamlining the monarchy, about focusing on purpose rather than pageantry. Those ideas once sounded like distant ambitions for a future chapter, but now they feel immediate, tangible. By recalibrating something as symbolic as the gallery, he demonstrated that change does not always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it arrives through subtraction, through correction. The contrast with Charles is impossible to ignore. Charles spent decades navigating complexity through patience, often absorbing criticism in order to preserve stability. His approach has always leaned toward gradual evolution, allowing time to soften resistance. William, shaped by a faster and more unforgiving era, appears less inclined to wait for consensus. He understands optics, but he also understands momentum. And momentum, once lost, is difficult to reclaim. By reclaiming that wall space, William was not erasing history. He was redefining how it is framed. Royal tradition has always depended on clarity of hierarchy, on unspoken rules about who stands where and why. In adjusting that balance, he asserted that tradition must be guarded carefully, not expanded casually. It was a quiet reminder that legacy is not a matter of proximity to power, but of enduring resonance. There is also something deeply personal woven into this decision. Trauma has a way of sharpening conviction. William's formative years unfolded under extraordinary pressure, shaped by loss and public scrutiny. That experience did not weaken him. It matured him. It taught him that leadership requires difficult choices, even when those choices disrupt comfort, especially when they do. Inside palace corridors, the message was unmistakable. Authority is shifting. Influence is consolidating around the future king. Decisions that once would have required layered negotiation are now being made with focused intent. This does not signal rebellion. It signals preparation. Preparation for a reign that will not merely inherit the crown, but recalibrate its direction. Some insiders reportedly interpreted the move as a blueprint, a preview of structural adjustments yet to come. If a portrait can be repositioned, what else might be reconsidered? Roles? Visibility? Priorities? The gallery may have been the first symbolic recalibration, but it may not be the last. And that possibility is what unsettles many within the institution. Because leadership is not defined by words, it is defined by action. And in this action, William revealed a monarchy that is measured, disciplined, and unafraid to assert moral boundaries when necessary. Yet even bold lines in the sand come with consequences. One portrait removed, one message delivered. But the aftershocks are only beginning. Behind palace doors, conversations have intensified. Alliances are quietly shifting. And those who underestimated William may now be reconsidering everything they thought they knew about the future of the crown. What appeared at first to be a contained decision is now rippling outward. Insiders suggest discussions about structure, about visibility, hierarchy, and long-term positioning have gained new urgency. The removal did not just alter a gallery wall. It altered internal calculations. If William is willing to make a move this symbolic before ascending the throne, what will he adjust once authority is absolute? There is quiet talk of internal restructuring. Not dramatic upheaval, but refinement. A tightening of roles. A clearer distinction between ceremonial presence and legacy significance. The monarchy, long accustomed to gradual adaptation, may be entering a phase of deliberate recalibration. And every senior royal can feel it. For Camilla, the next move becomes critical. Will she address the matter privately? Will she double down on visibility, asserting her relevance more publicly? Or will she retreat strategically, allowing time to absorb the shock? Each option carries risk. Silence may preserve dignity but invite speculation. Action may reclaim influence but deepen division. The tension is not just external, it is psychological. And then there is Charles, positioned at the center of a quiet storm. A husband and a father. A reigning monarch watching the future king assert himself in unmistakable ways. Reports suggest he remains outwardly composed, but the strain of divided loyalty cannot be ignored. Supporting his wife openly could undermine his son's authority. Supporting his son too visibly could wound his partner's standing. So once again, balance becomes a burden. Among senior royals, unease lingers. Some admire the clarity of William's stance. Others worry about the precedent it sets. If symbolic placement can be reversed so decisively, what else might be reconsidered? Invitations? Titles? Institutional priorities? The uncertainty alone is destabilizing. The monarchy thrives on predictability. This moment introduced unpredictability. Meanwhile, public trust hangs delicately between admiration and concern. Many see strength in decisive leadership. Others fear internal conflict disguised as reform. The crown survives not just on power, but on perception. And perception, once shaken, demands careful restoration. Every step forward now must be measured against the risk of widening fracture. The symbolism of the removal grows heavier with each passing day. It has become more than an isolated correction. It stands as a turning point of visible markers separating eras. Before the removal, the monarchy felt cautiously transitional. After it, the transition feels active, intentional, irreversible. At its core, this is a generational crossroads. The older model of quiet endurance confronting a newer model of defined boundaries. Tradition meeting transformation. Loyalty meeting legacy. And in that intersection lies the future shape of the crown. What began as a single action now feels like the opening chapter of something larger. The palace is adjusting, recalculating, bracing. Because when authority shifts quietly, it rarely stops at one decision. It gathers momentum. Because sometimes, the smallest gestures signal the greatest transformations. Tonight, the gallery stands altered not by renovation, but by resolve. Where Camilla's portrait once hung, there is now space. And in that space, a message lingers. Power in the monarchy is shifting. Legacy is being redefined. And 5 minutes ago may have marked the quiet beginning of an entirely new royal era. That empty space speaks louder than any gilded frame ever could. In a room designed to project continuity, the absence feels deliberate, intentional. It is not chaos. It is correction. The monarchy has always communicated through symbols, through positioning, through subtle visual hierarchies that signal permanence. And now, that carefully curated permanence has been interrupted not by scandal, not by public outrage, but by choice. William did not fill the gap with another portrait. He did not rush to replace it with a safer alternative. He allowed the space to remain. That decision carries weight. It suggests pause, reflection, a refusal to force history forward before it is ready. In reclaiming that narrative space, he did more than remove an image. He reasserted authorship over the story of the crown. For years, the monarchy has navigated delicate emotional terrain. Diana's memory, though never formally enshrined in that gallery as some believe it should have been, has always hovered in the public imagination. Her absence has been its own kind of presence. And in this moment, there is an unspoken sense of emotional closure, not through replacement, not through rivalry, but through restraint. William's action feels less like retaliation and more like protection. Protection of memory. Protection of meaning. Camilla's future standing within royal legacy now enters uncertain territory. She remains queen. She remains beside the king. But symbolic permanence is no longer assumed. It must evolve organically, shaped by time and public acceptance rather than strategic placement. The difference is subtle but profound. Influence cannot demand immortality, it must earn it. Public perception, once volatile and divided, appears to be settling. Not entirely unified, but clearer. Many now see William not merely as an heir, but as a leader already exercising judgment. His image has solidified around decisiveness balanced with discipline. He did not attack. He did not defend publicly. He acted. And that action resonates in an era where leadership is often measured by courage rather than comfort. At the same time, the monarchy itself adapts under pressure. Institutions survive by evolving without collapsing. This moment, tense and symbolic, has tested that adaptability. Yet there has been no public fracture, no dramatic fallout. The crown absorbs shock, recalibrates, and continues forward. That resilience is both its strength and its burden. But make no mistake, this was not a trivial adjustment. It was a marker, a line quietly drawn between eras, between approaches, between philosophies of power. William's move signals a monarchy less tolerant of ambiguity around legacy. A monarchy willing to clarify its symbols rather than let them drift. And perhaps most compelling of all is what remains unsaid. No speech announced this shift. No ceremony framed it. The transformation unfolded in near silence, which makes it even more powerful. When authority asserts itself without noise, it suggests confidence. It suggests preparation. It suggests inevitability. What comes next remains uncertain. Will further structural refinements follow? Will roles be redefined more clearly? Will other symbolic spaces undergo similar scrutiny? The palace is quieter now, but it is not still. Beneath the calm exterior, recalculation continues. Because when a future king demonstrates that he is willing to adjust legacy before inheriting the throne, he signals something profound: the future will not be accidental. It will be deliberate. The gallery may appear unchanged to casual observers, but those who understand the language of power know better. The empty space is not absence, it is intention. It is the quiet declaration that the next chapter of the monarchy will be written with firmer hands. And if one portrait could shake the palace this deeply, imagine what the next decision might do.